Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my Exoprimal review. This title was sent to me by Capcom so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, I've been live streaming the game here on the channel over the last couple of days. There's a lot of gameplay available for you to check out, and I would actually recommend that you'd go to one of those live streams and watch one of the matches from beginning to end to have a better understanding of what the Exoprimal gameplay loop is. Because one of the things that I've definitely noticed in my live streams is that a lot of people would jump into the live stream and they would see me in an exosuit battling hordes of dinosaurs, and their mind would instantly go to something like, oh, this game is kind of like Anthem, or this game is kind of like Warframe. Let me tell you something, Exoprimal is nothing like those two games. And the reasoning is both Anthem and Warframe and other games in the same vein consist of a cooperative gameplay experience at its core. You get together with a bunch of friends, you go and you kill monsters, you get loot, you upgrade your suits or whatever, and then you move on to kill bigger and badder monsters, so on and so forth, right? Exoprimal is not like that because its gameplay consists of a competitive nature. You are, for all intents and purposes, always in competition. And I understand that a lot of you might consider, well, but the queue, whenever you queue up to the match, it says PvP, random, and PvE. And yes, but at its very base, you're always, to a certain degree, in competition with another team. You see, the way it works is whenever you queue up for a match, the game matches you with 9 other players, or maybe less if you happen to be matched up with already a friend in your party or something like that. Then it will basically fill in. The point is there's going to be 10 players in every Exoprimal match. And the idea is that there's 2 teams of 5 players. Now, in the very first phase of the match, those 2 teams are both going to be in the same map, but they can't interact with one another. So think of it as 2 different instances of the same map, and they're both doing the same objectives, which usually consist of kill this amount of dinosaurs, or, protect this zone, or something of that nature, but usually it just involves killing hordes and hordes of dinosaurs in that first phase. So what these teams are doing is they're racing to see who can finish first. And now you're wondering, well, why is it so important who finishes first? Because once you finish the first phase of a match, you go into the final phase of the match, because there's 2 phases to every match. And once you go into the final phase, the team that gets there first is going to instantly start the final phase, and they will have a time advantage over the team that is still completing objectives in the first phase. This is why you're always running against time. Now, the final phase of an Exoprimal match is where things get interesting because it changes. It depends. For starters, if you go into the PvE queue, you're only going to have PvE type events, which usually just involve, oh, let's kill a bunch more dinosaurs and let's see who gets, who finishes faster. That's kind of like the way that it goes. Sometimes it might also go into this raid type encounter, which we'll get into more detail, but essentially it merges the 2 teams and you're now a 10-man team that is taking on a much greater challenge. And I know a lot of you are going to think like, oh, but I really wish I could just do the raid queue, but that's not an option yet. Maybe later down the line. For now, there's a chance that you just do more PvE, stuff similar to the first phase, or there's a chance that you go into one of these PvE raids. Now, if you queue into PvP, they're going to give you 3 different modes. I mean, I think there's more than 3 different modes, but there's a couple of different modes. So there's one mode which is Data Key Escort, which is basically payload. If you've played something like Overwatch, you'll be familiar with the concept of, well, not even Overwatch. This was like Team Fortress, I think. Payload started in Team Fortress. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know. Either way, most people that have ever played a shooter will know the concept of payload. You keep people close together to an item, which in this case is just a cube, and the cube moves forward, and the first team to get the cube to its destination wins. Now, when you queue into, when eventually you get into one of these data key scenarios, you're going to be in direct confrontation with the enemy team. You're both going to be in the same map, and you can attack the enemy team's exosuits. You can actually engage in proper PvP, deathmatch style, that kind of thing. There are other types of PvP encounters like control the point. So the longer you control a point, the more points you make and you win. And there's also one that involves collecting these chips. I really don't like that one. But basically you just run around and you collect these different data chips or whatever it is that they are, and whichever team gets to 80 chips first, they win, and you're also in the same map, and you can also kill each other and steal other teams' chips and stuff like that. So those are some of the encounters. Now, me personally, whenever I queue random, so sometimes I get PvE objectives, other times I get PvP objectives, I like to be surprised. I actually think, because the game was initially designed with the random option in mind. You just queue up into Dino Survival, and sometimes you get PvE, sometimes you get PvP, and it definitely feels like one of the better ways to play. But if you don't like engaging in direct confrontation with the enemy team, you can queue into the PvE thing. Just be aware that you're kind of always in some aspect competing against the enemy team. And here's the thing, in the final phase, you're also going to get something which is called a Dominator. So usually the team that has the lead will get the Dominator second, and the team that is losing will get the Dominator first to kind of make up the difference, right? So the idea of the Dominator is that they give you this power-up, you pick up the power-up, you can activate it, and you basically become a rampaging dinosaur that can go into the enemy team's location and beat the crap out of them. However, if the enemy team is well organized, they can, eliminate the dinosaur fairly fast. So there's a push and pull there, and also you can wait with your Dominator to kind of wait until the other team is struggling with a big dinosaur or something like that, and then you go in with your big dinosaur and you just wreak havoc. So even if you're playing just the PvE mode, you're still going to be dealing with the Dominator situation of the enemy team basically sending a player-controlled dinosaur to wreak havoc against your team. And this is kind of like, in a nutshell, the multiple gameplay modes that Exoprimal has. I'll talk a little bit more about each one a little bit further ahead, but I wanted to clarify what Exoprimal is before we actually get into the rest of the discussion, because I feel like that is one of the things that people are really confused about. Like I said, watching a match makes it a lot easier than just listening to me talk. So if you're still confused after this, just watch some gameplay and watch a match from the beginning then, and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. And now you're wondering, but is all of that stuff that you just described fun? And in my opinion, yes. I've been playing pretty much since the game released every single day. I've been live streaming it here on the channel, and I've been having an absolute blast. I like when I get PvE objectives. I like when I get PvP objectives. Actually, I enjoyed the PvP a lot more than I initially predicted, particularly the data key, which is payload. I have a blast playing payload. But I also really enjoy the raids. I think the raids are a lot of fun, but there are a couple of problems here and there, which I will explain in more detail as we move forward. But now we get into what is essentially the most contentious point of Exoprimal, which is its business model. And that is where I feel we have a couple of issues. So the business model of Exoprimal, it is a buy-to-play game. It costs $60 for the base version of the game, which does not include the seasonal pass. And for that price, you get, the base game, and you're missing, like, I think 3 exosuits, which you unlock just by playing the game. You don't have to pay to unlock exosuits. There is a microtransaction where you can buy the exosuits and gain access to them instantly. You don't have to do that. You level up fairly fast in the game, so it's not really a problem unless you're like really dying to play the sniper exosuit, because that one takes a while to unlock. But everything else unlocks fairly fast, and I don't think it's a huge problem. And in case you're wondering, oh, but then I still have to level it up. But leveling up exosuits also goes reasonably fast, so long as you have, so long as you can win 1 or 2 matches every now and then, you'll be fine. You should be able to level up your exosuits. It's not really a problem. I've been leveling up every exosuit that I want in a fairly short amount of time. Like currently, I think I'm somewhere north of 40 hours of gameplay, give or take. And I've leveled up like, 4 exosuits, I think, maybe 5 even. Because I've spread myself out a little bit. Like my main... I should also say that even though I leveled some of those, like the exosuit that I've played the most is currently level 40-something, which is twice the maximum level, because you can keep leveling up the exosuits. There's no advantage, but, they just keep leveling up to kind of mark your experience with the exosuit, I guess. All of the exosuits cap at level 20, so I'm like level 40-something with Roadblock, which is my favorite exosuit because it's the best. It is what it is. But anyway, That is the problem, the business model, because it is a full price game. $60 is a full price game. The season pass is separate, and there's still microtransactions. Now, there's also the fact that this game is available on Game Pass. And on Game Pass, to me, this is a no-brainer recommendation. Like, if you have Game Pass, download the game, play it. It is a ton of fun, particularly if you get to play with friends, because this is the type of game that is much more fun if you play with friends, because you can kind of coordinate to some extent, which is much better than jumping in with a bunch of randoms, and then you get like 3 people trying to play Murasame for some reason, which everybody wants to play that goddamn Exo. I hate it. I can't stand it. It is... Anyway, that's besides the point. So now when you hear something like this, you're going to question yourself, well then, it's $60 and, maybe you don't have Game Pass. Is it worth it? And this is when things get a little bit tricky. I don't know if it's going to be worth it for everyone. I don't. I think that $60 is a lot of money for what the game is doing, especially when you buy the game for $60 and it's still... in its essence, feels like a free-to-play experience because, you're just jumping into matches kind of like what you would expect of a free-to-play game. You're jumping into matches, you do a match, you kill a bunch of dinosaurs, you maybe kill some players, or maybe you kill even more dinosaurs, maybe you do a raid, and then you repeat and you jump in again. Now, there's currently, I think it's probably somewhere between 4 or 5 maps, maybe, that you do. And this is not counting the raid maps because there's like one final map for the big baddie at the end. And how many exosuits are there? I think there's like 4 assault exosuits and then 3 tanks and 3 healers. So there's 10 total exosuits spread out across, like I said, 4 or 5 maps. And these maps have different objectives and different stuff that they generate for each of the missions. And eventually you also unlock additional dinosaurs besides the initial pool of dinosaurs, which makes things get a little bit more interesting. But at the end of the day, your experience still is, re-queuing into these matches and doing them over and over again to level up your player level and your battle pass and all of that stuff, which just has that feel of a free-to-play game. And to ask a premium price like $60 is going to be rough. So my recommendation is, like, if you have that sort of disposable income and if the gameplay seems like fun, jump right in. I think you're going to have a blast. If not, I would recommend maybe try getting 1 month of Battle Pass if you can play it on PC or play it on your Xbox or whatever. But on PlayStation, maybe wait for a discount or something like that because it's a lot of money for what you're getting right now. Now, it is also important to mention that this is a brand new IP and it is going to be receiving additional content on the 28th of July, so I will be reporting back then as well, because I think on the 28th we're getting, which is this Savage Gauntlet mode. I believe that is an exclusive PvE mode. However, it is also important to mention that to gain access to that, you need to finish the story, which will still take you around, 30 hours on average to finish, because the story progression varies depending on whether or not you win a match. If you win the match, you progress faster through the story. If you're constantly losing matches, then you progress slower through the story. That's kind of the way that it goes. But yeah, that is the business model. Also important to remember, this game is always online, which is another thing that I know is a concern, particularly because people are going to be wondering, well, always online games, there's this problem which if the community does not stick with the game, then maybe, the game shuts down, all these things. And these, by the way, are topics that I tackled directly with the community manager on Conscast. And an important thing to keep in mind is that this game is on Game Pass, so it is going to have an innate player base because the game has crossplay. So there's always, at least for the next couple of months, there's going to be a significant pool of players that you're going to be able to just queue into games and not really have a problem. But a couple of months from now, we'll have to see. Now, it seems that like they have a plan in terms of adding more content to the game. There's a roadmap. There's all of these things. Whether or not that is going to keep people interested in the game, I can't predict the future. What I can tell you is that right now, it is definitely a game that I am playing. It is definitely a game that I am having fun in. I love playing Roadblock, and either doing PvE or PvP doesn't really matter. I also play other exosuits, like I play Barrage or Damage. I've played Witch Doctor for healing, because the exosuits are also role-based. So you'll want to have a certain type of team composition to be successful on these engagements. Usually what you're shooting for is like one or two tanks, and if you have two tanks, you're talking about, you know, maybe a roadblock and a Murasame, which is a more offensive type of tank, or one or two healers, and then just have the rest be filled with assaults. What you don't want is two tanks and two healers. I would definitely not recommend that. I think that's pretty bad all around. Maybe for PvP it could be interesting, but like for PvE, you're going to suffer quite a bit with two tanks and two healers. The exosuits are customizable, which means that you actually unlock these modules as you level up an exosuit, and then you get to choose between two different abilities of the exosuit that get like a different effect to them. Like, for instance, if you're playing Roadblock, you can choose between, oh, my shield now has more health, so I can block more things, or I can upgrade my fists, and I just deal more damage, and I punch things harder, and there's a chance for me to stun, and all of these other things, right? And all of the exosuits have this kind of, like, variability that allows you to customize your gameplay to a certain extent. Now, naturally, this does not drastically change the way that you play the game, but it does give you an incentive to kind of level up these suits, and you get additional benefits. Although on some suits, some of the changes almost feel necessary. Like Zephyr can gain like 40% additional damage at level 16. And which was the other one? Nimbus can also gain significantly more healing at level 16. So there are some exosuits that are more dependent on these modules than others. But then there's also these generic modules that any suit can use, and you can kind of like mix and match this and do like a build, and then you can also choose these things that are called rigs. That is essentially an additional ability that you get to do, and you know, changing these things to kind of suit your play style a little bit. So there is some customization there. Naturally, with this being the type of game that has a season pass and all that stuff, there's also going to be extensive cosmetic customization. There's like these decals that you can put on your suit, as well as what's the thing called? There's like an attachment thing that you can put. Like my character has a disco ball on his right butt cheek because I thought that was kind of cool. But you know, it is what it is. There is customization. In terms of the microtransactions, you might be wondering, okay, just how deep are we going into microtransactions? And in terms of items that you can actually buy from the shop, there's not really that much. There's the season pass, there's the soundtrack, there's that starter kit that instantly unlocks 3 of the suits. But like I said, you can unlock those through gameplay, so I definitely wouldn't buy that. And then there's 5 skins specific for 5 of the different exosuits. And in case you're wondering, in terms of you know, how good these skins look, they look much better than the skins that you can get by just playing the game. In my opinion, not really. And then there's also the soundtrack that you can buy. That's about everything that is available in the form of microtransactions right now. At the end of the day, like I said, it is still a full-priced game, always online, with a battle pass, which makes it kind of like hard to recommend. I've already talked about that earlier in the video, but everything else, the game is fun. The gameplay is good. The visuals are pretty friggin' sweet. I mean, just look at the amount of dinosaurs that you can have on screen at any given time. And here's an interesting thing in terms of the visuals of the game. There are some times where you're in a map where you hear the AI just go like, oh, Carnage module online, which means that it's just going to start raining raptors into the map. And I do mean like a absolute wave, like a Zerg swarm of raptors just barreling through. Like actually more raptors than you would see in a StarCraft game in the form of Zergs, okay? More than that. And initially, you see them like maybe a little bit off screen because there's a specific scenario where they come through a bridge and they barrel through and they destroy everything that's on the bridge, and then they start entering the playable area. You can't actually go to the bridge. So I was thinking to myself like, oh, when they're going through the bridge, they're probably not really interactable because, you know, you don't want to have to deal with that, right? But I was playing the game, and I started shooting them at the bridge one time with, I had the Deadeye, which has a rifle, and I was shooting them at the bridge, and I was killing them at the bridge, and you could see them fall over, and I was like, what? This is just like hundreds and hundreds of, like, I don't know what kind of black magic they're doing with the RE engine in this game, but it is absolutely insane. The visuals are awesome. The performance is excellent. Okay, this is the gold standard of performance. I'm playing on PS5, by the way. I'm assuming on PC you can get even better performance. But like, this is the gold standard when it comes to performance currently in the game. Because quite simply, you can have hundreds of dinosaurs on screen raining from the sky, 5 players all shooting at them. Hell, in some scenarios, like in some of these raids, you can have hundreds of dinos and 10 players on screen, all of them doing different abilities, and the game doesn't skip a beat. All right? It is the gold tier of performance. Animations are awesome. The cinematics are good. The game does have a story. The cinematics are very well animated, really good. In terms of sound, the sound is also great. The soundtrack is fantastic. I really like it. There's a lot of guitars and bumped up music. And you guys know I like that type of stuff. The voice acting in the cinematics, also good. And then we also have the story. Now, in terms of the story is good, but I wouldn't say that it is excellent. But then again, when it comes to a game like this where you're jumping from match to match with friends, this is not the type of game that you're like, oh man, I want to get really giga immersed in the story. But interestingly enough, you can. That's an interesting thing. They took really good care of story by basically having this whole separate thing where as you advance through the game, you're unlocking these files that you can go and you can learn more about the story, and you get to know more about the world and all of these things. Or if you're not interested, you can just wait, and then eventually the game just gives you the main cutscenes that really matter to advance you through the game. If you want to get stuck in and learn more about the story, you can. If you want to not pay that much attention to it, you can basically just play the game, and eventually they'll give you the cutscenes that matter to you. And the reason they do this is because you don't want to be stuck in cutscenes all the time when you're playing a multiplayer game with friends. So it's nice that there's a whole separate section for the story that you can just go and rewatch cutscenes if you want to, and watch all of these additional files that they have on there with audio files and all these different clues as to what happened in terms of the Bikitoa incident. And it's actually a pretty good story. And if you take into consideration that this game involves time travel, which usually whenever there's a story around time travel, things tend to get pretty out of hand pretty friggin' fast. In this game, you actually can follow it along fairly easily, and then at the very end, they even just straight up give you a flow chart, which tells you exactly which event triggered what, which timeline it was in, and all of that stuff. It gets fully explained, so that even if you're going through certain, I don't understand this at all, this is crazy talk, how did this even happen? At the end, they're just okay, here's the timeline. Now that we've gathered all the clues, here's everything that happened, and it's fairly easy to follow, and it's an enjoyable story, in my personal opinion. But if you've played the game, let me know if you think differently. But overall, like I've been saying, I love this game. I think the game is a ton of fun. I think that this is the type of game that you just jump in with a couple of friends, and you just kind of switch your brain off, and you kill a bunch of dinosaurs, and you have a good time. That's the way that I look at it. In a lot of ways, I feel like this fulfills a need for me that is the same type of need that a lot of people get from something like a Fortnite or a Call of Duty or a Counter-Strike, right? A lot of people will get together and they'll just play these games for hours on end, battle royales and whatnot, and Counter-Strike and Overwatch and all of these things. Me personally, I tend to get bored of that type of stuff reasonably fast. But when it comes to Exoprimal, it's much more fun because it has PvE elements up until the point where then there can be a PvP clash. So it lets me flex the PvE stuff that you can do, especially because in this game, due to the fact that there are these roles and stuff that you can do, I can be a tank, and the tank is not worthless. Which in most games, when there's a tank, the tank is usually worthless for most things. I'm sorry, it's the truth. It's oh yeah, I'm the tank. Let me just sit here, hold my shield, do nothing. In this game, if you're playing Roadblock, I will jump into the enemy team and I will beat their faces into a pulp, and it feels great. I love it. But yeah, there's different game modes, and here's an important thing, which I think that a lot of people that maybe jump in on Game Pass and maybe they play for a little bit and they're like, oh, this is too repetitive, I'm done. The game unlocks more modes the more you play. It unlocks more things. Like I said, the raid, it takes a while to unlock that. It also unlocks more dinosaurs as you keep going. So there's a lot of stuff there. Now, I also have a couple of complaints. And these are some downsides that I've already reported to the team, and hopefully they can fix some of this stuff. And the number one complaint that I have is it's only partially crossplay. What does that mean? That means that while I am matchmaking with people that are playing on, I'm playing on PS5. When I matchmake, I'm matchmaking with people that are playing on PC. That means I'm matching with people that are on Steam, or I'm matching with people that are on, what's it called, the Windows Store, or I'm matching with people with Xbox. Actually, I'm matching with all those three pools combined, coupled together with whoever happens to play on PlayStation 5. So when you're matchmaking with all these people. But when you're forming a party, you're not. And that, in my opinion, is a serious problem. So, for instance, if my friend picks up the game on Steam, I can't play with him because I'm playing on PlayStation 5. Now, I might get randomly match made with him, either on my team or against me, who knows, but we can't form a party. So PlayStation can only form a party with other PlayStation users. Steam can only form party with other Steam users. And Xbox can form party with other Xbox users as well as PC users that bought the game on the Windows Store or got it through Game Pass on PC or whatever, right? So you have these three pools of players that while they can play against each other and they can matchmake with each other, they can't they can't make a party outside of their platform. And I think that really, really sucks. And another problem is that there's also not cross progression. So what does this mean? Despite the fact that the whole game uses Capcom ID, right? If I buy the game on Steam, which I actually have a code for Steam that I could use if I wanted to, but if I was to buy the game on Steam, I would not be able to carry over the progress that I have on my PlayStation 5 currently. I don't know if this is something that they can change for the future. This is definitely part of the feedback that I sent to the team. That's another problem. It's like, I mean, come on. The whole point of this is to have full crossplay, full cross progression. I feel like that should be an absolute no-brainer. I feel like this is something that a lot of games have already done, particularly games that are always online. Like, for instance, this Dauntless does this. You know, Dauntless has full crossplay. You can make parties across different platforms, and you have cross progression. Like, you can play on PC and then get that same character on your Switch. Like, this doesn't seem like this should be a big deal to solve, but apparently it is. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that they are using the native party system. So when I'm inviting people, I'm not using like Capcom ID. I'm using PlayStation Network. And that makes me think that this could be a tricky problem to solve in terms of actually having full crossplay and full cross progression. Hopefully they can fix that. We'll see. But for now, that's the state that we're in. Then we also have the fact that I don't play a lot of Battle Pass games. So I'm told that this is standard for Battle Pass games. And that is that the free track of the Battle Pass doesn't really have a whole lot. Like, you have like one thing every 5 levels or so on the free track. And I was like, I mean, if you want free players to actually grind the free track of the Battle Pass, it should have more things on it. It should have a couple of more rewards on there. I've been told by people like, no, this looks like a regular free Battle Pass. And I was like, wow, that sucks for regular Battle Passes. Like, I'm sorry. Like, you should definitely have more stuff in there to get people to actually play the game and unlock those things on Battle Pass. This is the reason why I don't like Battle Passes to begin with. Like, I'm playing the game. I'm not thinking about the Battle Pass. I'm thinking about like, ooh, in this next match, I'm going to get my roadblock. I'm going to beat the crap out of somebody. Or, hey, I feel like healing this. That's what I'm thinking about. I never look at Battle Passes. I don't like them at all. Another problem that we have is you can't skip cutscenes in the game currently. Now, I just told you how there's all these things with the story, but like once you actually jump into the game, some of the missions have cutscenes in them. And currently you can't skip them. And I'm just like, oof. Why? There should be a vote to skip. This was, again, one of the things that I instantly reported back to the team. It's like, hey, you guys should add this functionality in there, especially for the final boss fight. Now, I'm not going to give you any details about the final boss fight, but just know there's a lot of cutscenes in the final boss fight, and that is a repeatable mission, and you can't skip those cutscenes. Like, I feel like you spend about a third of that boss fight, assuming that things go according to plan, because it's actually a challenging boss fight. It's like a big raid that you go do at the end. It's really fun. I really like it. But I feel like you spend 1/3 of that watching cutscenes. So they definitely need to implement something to just allow people to vote to skip the cutscene. And then finally, the game also has loot boxes. You can't buy them though. You can't buy loot boxes. You just get them by playing the game. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of loot boxes either. But interestingly enough, I've been getting every single skin possible in the game, with exception of the exosuit that I like to play, which is the roadblock. But anyway, yeah, that's Exoprimal. I think it's pretty fun. I think there's a lot of good in the game, and it's a new IP from Capcom. I like it. I think that there's some really cool stuff about it, but I think that the business model is going to be very challenging. I think that the best scenario is if you have Game Pass, play it on Game Pass, and I would wholeheartedly recommend, check it out. Maybe even consider, if you can afford like 1 month of Game Pass, get it there, check it out for a month, because it is a lot of fun. It is definitely worth at least 1 month of Game Pass, hands down. But, you know, the rest of it, it's all up to whether or not you have the disposable income and if you like this type of gameplay. Anyway, that's going to be it for this review. If you guys enjoyed it, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy it, dislike button. Feedback is important. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong. Stay safe. Peace out.